Hi, this is Bennett Cyphers from EFF, and you're listening to Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. I'm your host, Kerry Parker, and today we have episode 223 for June 7th, 2021. Hope everybody had a fun Memorial Day weekend here in the U.S. last week. I'm retired now, so they're kind of all the same to me. Don't want to rub it in or anything, but, I'm living the dream, man. I'm living the dream. Okay, so today we have part 2 of our interview with Bennett Cyphers from the EFF. And we're going to wrap up our discussion of Google's new FLoC, or Federated Learning of Cohorts technology, that is supposed to replace third-party cookies and supposedly a privacy-preserving way to track you. And if that sounds a bit oxymoronic, it's because it is. So we'll get to that in just a minute, and a couple quick notes before we start. The Challenge Coin promotion is going well so far. It's still got some time to get a coin, though, if you want it. I'm going to run this through the end of June. So there's a limited number of coins of each color, though, too. So if you want to make sure that you get the exact coin that you want, sooner is better than later. Now, another part of this promotion for people who join at the new spiffy Knight Errant level is that I will announce your knighthood to the realm right here on the podcast. And we've got another one of those coming up. Stay tuned to the end of the show for that one. Also, I'll tell you about a really crazy, deep discount sale on my book right now. It's literally never been cheaper, so if you were ever thinking about getting a book, now is absolutely the time. I'll give you more info about that after the interview as well. A couple quick news reminders. Amazon's Sidewalk is going to be opt-out by default, and it will start, I think, this week. So if you want to opt out of that, now is the time to do it, though you can opt out at any time. So I will definitely be covering that in next week's news show. But I'll put a link in the show notes to an article on how to turn that off if you're interested in making sure you get on top of that now. I will say that I was kind of frustrated. I went to look for this option on my Amazon Alexa app, and it wasn't there. And I'm like, that's odd. And then I realized I don't think I have any Amazon devices anymore that support Sidewalk. So my guess is that if you don't see it, then that's probably the case for you too, because it's only supported on certain of their devices. Like the Ring doorbell, I think one of their outdoor webcams, and the Echo line of products. And if you don't have a recent one of those, or the doorbell or whatever, like I don't, my guess is it won't even show up in there. So if you go in there and you look for the option to turn it off and it's not even listed, my guess is that that's the reason why. And next week I'm also going to talk about why. I mean, I think I probably said that everyone should opt out of this, but I did sort of compare it to, Apple's Find My mesh network, and there's some nuance to this. We'll get into that next week. All right, let's get back to the interview. Part 2 of my interview with Bennett Cyphers. One trigger warning on swear words. There's one bad word in here, and it's really not that bad, at least in my book. But just FYI, there's a little cussing in here. So with that, let's get to part 2 of our interview with Bennett Cyphers. So there's 2 things that jumped out at me as we were talking about this that are crucial, because it's so many, whenever you get into the weeds on some of these, you're talking all the technical stuff. And I read that same white paper, but at the end of it, you gotta still look past it, because there's a couple of key things that we got to remember. First of all, it could change, as you've been saying multiple times. This whole thing is just a proposal; it could change. Second, currently, Google, even though they are ruling some things out, Google still knows these things or can know these things. They're just choosing their own goodness of heart what they're going to try to not share. Second, Google still gets to decide what those categories are and how to label them. They could get them wrong. They could make a different decision that you would make. They might think something is not sensitive that you would think is sensitive. Yeah. This paper presents everything in the greatest possible light, like we're trying to do the right thing, but it doesn't mean it's what's going to actually happen, either by mistake or on purpose. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. There is, this is totally Google's discretion. It's, the fact that this system depends on a sort of benevolent and omniscient overseer to weed out all the potential harms should really be a red flag right off the bat, no matter how much you trust Google. And it's going to, it means that anyone else who wants to implement this in their own browser is either going to have to trust Google's system or build their own big surveillance machine to do this kind of auditing on their own.
And it also gives, other browsers that might be less scrupulous a totally defensible reason to do this kind of mass surveillance, right? And like link up, FLoC IDs to real browsing history. And yeah, like you said, this doesn't stop anyone from, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Like once we get into more sort of the issues with FLoC, I think one of the big ones is there's still so many other ways for advertisers to coerce you into sharing raw data other than cookies. Like there's all kinds of ways that they can do that, and this is just gonna give them incentive to do that. Like they're gonna want to figure out like, all right, who's actually in these different FLoC IDs?
Right.
All right, we need more information. How are we gonna get that? Oh, browser extension. Oh, build our own browser. Oh, like logins, like email logins. Like there's all kinds of ways.
Right, and so that does lead to my next question, and that is, what often happens when we're trying to anonymize or de-identify data is that it's all well and good if you could manage to do it exactly in the white paper, ivory tower way that you want to do it, but then you take any other data set, and if you can correlate that de-anonymized or that anonymized de-identified data with another one, then all of a sudden you can re-identify people. It doesn't take a whole lot of other information.
Yeah, no, totally.
And a lot of these companies have that information by virtue of you creating an account with them or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, but here's a particular question. So one thing I read is that your ID, your cohort bin, is not fixed. And just like your browsing history isn't fixed, and who you are as a person isn't fixed over time. These bins change over time. How does that work? And if they do change over time, what's to prevent someone from recording the history of how my bin changes and then using that to identify me?
Nothing. Nothing is stopping. Yeah, and if you go look at the FLoC GitHub right now, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Go ahead.
It's kind of a shit show right now. As it's gotten more attention, there's been all kinds of people jumping in with all the issues, and people have been pointing out all this stuff that you're saying. And I think we'll probably get into this later, but like one of the big things that's probably going to happen is this is going to push more and more sites into having logins so they can collect their own data about you.
Yeah.
And then usually on behalf of advertisers. And so like any site that you log into, you put your email address into to access content, they're going to, they have their stable identifier for you, even better than a cookie.
Right.
And, whenever you visit that site, they're going to see your FLoC ID. They'll be like, oh, they're in this FLoC this week. That means they were interested in these things this week. And they'll see how that changes over time. And the other thing that's been pointed out is like, so third-party cookies are going away. First-party cookies are not.
Right.
So that means, you visit any site, and that site can drop a site-specific cookie into your browser, and, they'll see it every time you visit that specific site, and they'll collect the information about what you do on that site. And that on its own, it's not really that scary. It's kind of makes sense, right? It's like, if the analogy is like a brick and mortar store, it's like every time you walk into the same store, the shopkeeper sees you, and they know who you are, and they know what you do.
Right.
And right, like that's kind of fun. You get to define that relationship on your own terms. But if they collect your FLoC ID every week, and they have this, like months and months worth of like how your FLoC ID has changed, and then they go to an advertiser and say like, hey, I've got this customer, and like here's their FLoC history. That FLoC history is probably going to be uniquely identifying, right? Like it's already every FLoC only has a few thousand people in it, and like what are the odds that your FLoC is going to change in the exact same way as all those few thousand other people every single week?
Exactly.
Very, very low.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, it is another. they've kind of created another cross-context identifier. It's going to be a little bit harder to use than cookies for sure, but it's there. And not only is it an identifier, but it carries a lot of information with it. Like that string of FLoCs doesn't just identify you, it also gives whoever sees it a ton of context about who you are and how you've behaved.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So here's something I fundamentally do not understand about this entire proposed system. And that is Google and Facebook both claim up and down whenever they're pressed that we don't sell user data. No, they sell access to your data, right? That's the whole proprietary thing. That's like they collect all this data so that they can turn around and blindly sell it to someone else because someone else doesn't have access to it.
They don't want to sell your data.
Yeah. Right. They want to, but doesn't this turn all that on its head? Like if this is truly a public thing and any server who asks for it and has permission to get it could get your FLoC ID, doesn't that give away the store for them?
In a way, yes. I mean, that's a big part of their selling point to advertisers is Google keeps saying, this is going to democratize access to data, access to, sensitive user data. But that's only true to an extent. So this comes back to like, what do these FLoC IDs mean? Like if you see someone's FLoC ID, it's a number. Like you can you can test it out right now. You go see your own FLoC ID, it'll be like, a 6-digit number, and it doesn't mean anything on its own. It's just a number. You have no idea of knowing like what sites went into that, or like if I had changed a particular site, how would that have changed my number? There's you don't know. You could go into the code and figure it out, I guess, if you have tons and tons of time. But even that, like even knowing which sites are used to compute particular FLoC IDs isn't all that useful on its own. What is really going to be useful is observing the sort of macro level trends of how people in these different FLoCs behave. And that's where the value of FLoC is going to come from. Is Google is trying to design it so that people in a particular FLoC tend to behave the same way and tend to be interested in the same things. But to learn what those behaviors are and what those interests are, you're going to need a ton of auxiliary data about how people in those FLoCs tend to behave. And, Google's going to have it. Google's going to be better positioned than anyone else in the world to say like, all right, these people in this FLoC, where are they going? What are they doing? What times are they doing it? What time zones? What languages? All these other things, like what do they buy? What ads do they click on? Google's going to be best positioned in the world to collect that data. Facebook's going to be second best position in the world to collect that data. As it's going to be totally dependent on like how big your existing sort of observation network is going to correlate directly with how much value you can get out of FLoC.
Right, and this is a whole other subject, but then you could think about the NSA and the CIA who probably can collect even more than that, and that's a whole other rabbit hole. We'll skip for this one. We'll bring you back for that one. So you said right now I could go look at my FLoC ID. How might I do that? And if I did get my FLoC ID, is there any way to decode that? Like, is there any way for me to take that ID and through a Google API or something and kind of get information about what that ID says about me?
So right now, the Chrome is running what's called an origin trial with FLoC, which means a small sample of the Chrome population has FLoC enabled, but it's not obvious at all whether you're in that sample, and there's no way to force yourself into or out of that sample. Okay. Well, if you're in that sample, you can turn off third-party cookies, and that will disable FLoC. But that's the way it works for now.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So, and they announced a couple of weeks ago that it was going to be 0.5% of Chrome users would be part of the trial to start with. So we put together a website called amiflocked.org, which you can go visit, and it'll try and figure out whether you are part of the sample or not. But then I've also seen some chatter on Google mailing lists, like just in the past couple of days, that seems to indicate that they might not have even rolled it out to Chrome Stable yet. Like it might only be in beta and Canary. Anyway, if you want to test it out, you can run Chrome with some command line flags, and it will, start up a version of Chrome that does have FLoC enabled. So yeah, you can try it out if you want to, but most people aren't in the trial right now. This also only affects certain countries, I think.
By the way, they totally did not think that name through, because I've seen so many takeoffs on, am I flocked or FLoC no, or anyway. So that's a marketing mistake that I'm sure they will fix.
Yeah, definitely.
But
also, federated learning of cohorts currently contains neither federation nor learning.
Yeah, minor considerations when you're coming up with an acronym, a cool acronym. Okay, so what I didn't hear say is, if I can get my ID, is there any way for me to decode that ID? Can I glean any information if I can get my ID?
No.
Okay.
No, that's the short answer.
All right. Going forward, when this thing is finally implemented, at least the way they're currently talking about it, does FLoC require consent or assistance from the websites that I visit? I mean, so far we've only talked about this behavior, this algorithm stuff being baked into the browser. What participation is required by the sites I visit for them to work with FLoC?
Right now, nothing. So again, for the trial, subject to change, if Chrome has this like ad detection software built in, they don't block ads, but they'll detect them. If any site you visit loads ads or ad-related code, quote unquote, I'm not really sure what that means, then it will be included in the FLoC calculation. The sites can opt out by sending a HTTP header called permissions policy interest cohort equals none or something like that. But it's opt out for websites, not opt in.
Okay, so they don't have to do anything to participate. Automatically, they will be participating if they do nothing. But if they wanted to, for some reason, if they were, let's say it's Pornhub or some site that just explicitly says, you know what, I don't trust you. I don't want to be part of this. They can at least signal, and of course it could be ignored, but they could at least signal to Google that they do not want to participate in this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And Chrome will honor that. This is another thing that's going to be implementation dependent. So if another browser adopts this, they might not respect the same signals or respect any signals at all. But yeah, that's how it works.
So what does this mean for the broader industry? I mean, so there's, as you've said, there's this massive industry built up around this third-party cookie technologies and similar technologies. And, people have blamed Apple for the same thing, where they come up with these really cool techniques for stopping these things, but conveniently what that means is it helps them in some indirect way. What happens to data miners now and there's not many companies that are advertising other than Google and Facebook, but I mean, there are some, and there are other companies that benefit from this system as well. Is their livelihood over at this point when FLoC becomes a reality?
Oh, they're upset. They're upset for sure. But I think the intention of FLoC in part is not to kill off, Google's sort of small batch of competitors in this advertising space. I think Google sees this as a lifeline to that industry because, there is still going to be behavioral targeting to do, and there is still going to be data collection is still going to be valuable in a world with FLoC. In fact, it's going to be necessary if you want to make good use of FLoC. So, a lot of these companies, if FLoC does become the new norm, can probably shift their existing infrastructure over to figuring out which FLoCs they want to target.
Okay.
When Google made their announcement, they made an announcement on March 3rd that they're going to kind of go all in on FLoC and related tech, and they're not going to support third-party identifiers anymore. And a whole bunch of ad tech stocks kind of plummeted. So they're upset about it for sure.
So what about as a user? It sounds like, will it be possible, and I'm sure that you and, perhaps DuckDuckGo and some others, maybe uBlock Origin, will be certainly looking at this. Is there a way for me as a user, regardless, or maybe not regardless of what browser I'm using, but by browser choice or by installing an extension for me to defeat FLoC, even if Google doesn't want me to defeat FLoC. Currently they're giving you a way to defeat it by turning off third-party cookies, which of course they could disable at any time, or just ignore, or some other browser could come along and not make that choice. Is there a way to block this technology in a verifiable way as a user by choosing the right browser or by using a plugin?
Yeah, use a browser that's not Chrome. that's the easiest way right now. But yeah, you can plug in DuckDuckGo has a plugin that will right now block FLoC. We're working on getting that into Privacy Badger as well. So
okay, cool.
Maybe by the time this airs, Privacy Badger will also block FLoC out of the box. Yeah, so luckily there's a pretty robust extension ecosystem on Chrome right now, and they can control things. There's no switch to turn FLoC off right now. Google has said there will be in the future, but you can, if you have an extension, the extension can go in and just modify how JavaScript on a page works, and therefore block access to FLoC.
Okay. All right. So just stepping back for a minute. I mean, obviously Google, and just playing devil's advocate here, Google's appears to be trying to do the right thing in at least what it believes to be the right thing. It's trying to find the happy medium between doing what it believes are more valuable ads to both the people that want to advertise and the people who look at ads, and still preserve privacy. I mean, on some level, this is, I guess we should applaud them for at least trying to do this. And yet, EFF's position certainly seems to be that this is a bad thing. How do you reconcile that? I mean, let's take them at their word. Let's assume they're trying to do the right thing, and what they're trying to pull off will somehow work. Why is this bad?
So I really don't think FLoC is the most evil thing out there. I don't think it's
a ringing endorsement. It's not the most evil thing out there.
I don't think the people who made it are ill-intentioned. I think they are really trying to do the right thing. I think it's just, it comes down to a fundamental disagreement. The people at Google think targeted ads are the only way to make the web work, and so they need to save targeted ads at all costs. And so that's their framing. They're looking at it like, all right, we need behavioral targeting. People want privacy. Let's see how much privacy we can give them as long as we keep enabling behavioral targeting. And we at EFF just reject that premise. We don't think you need behavioral targeting. we think there are a lot of other harms that come along with behavioral targeting beyond the sort of peeping Tom theory of privacy. There's a great article in Wired about that a couple weeks ago. Just like, this framing that like the only evil part of ad tech right now is that like unknown third parties are collecting your browsing history. Like, yes, that is a big bad part of ad tech, but there are other things that are bad about it as well. And most of them have to do with behavioral targeting. And those other things that are bad are not going to be fixed by FLoC. And even the sort of peeping Tom part of it isn't going to be totally fixed by FLoC. So it's like, it's a half measure, and it's a half measure that they don't have to take. Like they don't, Firefox, Safari, Brave, all these other browsers are, well, Brave is a little bit complicated, but Firefox and Safari, they killed off third-party cookies and they didn't replace them with anything because that's what users want. Like no user is saying like, oh, I need a browser that's going to let me see my behaviorally targeted ads. No one wants that. Advertisers want that.
Right.
And so it's just a clear sign that Google is putting the interests of advertisers before the interests of users. They are considering the interests of users and they're trying to do what they can, but like it's within this context of we must protect ads at all costs.
Well, and that was the other assumption I didn't get to at the beginning. I said there were two assumptions all this stuff was based on that I think we needed to challenge. And the other one of those two was that users are okay with this, or users even want this. And I think it's quite obvious when the rollout of, and by the time this airs, it will have happened, but the rollout of iOS 14.5 with the new tracking transparency thing, or TTP, whatever Apple's thing is, the collective freakout that happened when Apple had the audacity to say that, we're going to bring it up front and center and let the user know, hey, this app wants to track you, and give them a choice, yes or no. And Facebook in particular, but several others just wigged out because it's like, whoa, no, you're not supposed to ask them. They'll never say yes.
Yeah.
Yet that's, again, this is all premised on this.
No, yeah, you're totally right. It's the whole industry has always depended on users' lack of knowledge and on either a total lack of consent or extremely dishonest framings designed to manufacture consent.
Dark patterns,
Yeah, exactly. And so once you take that away, the whole system does fall apart. I'm sure there are people who legitimately prefer targeted ads, but they are a minority. And we just think the default should be you have to opt in a way that is meaningful to this kind of thing. It shouldn't be, built into your browser and couched in language that you don't understand and all this other stuff. So,
or all the euphemisms like, would you like to have an enhanced experience? Would you like to have a customized experience?
Right.
And you mentioned this actually earlier, and I'm coming back to this too. And that's privacy regulations. We don't really have any federal level stuff at the U.S. We're starting to get some state level stuff, and there's now maybe rumors in this administration of doing something federal. But in the EU, you specifically called out early in this interview that in the EU they're not doing this trial. Is that because it doesn't stand up to GDPR? How does GDPR affect FLoC? I mean, does it even allow it? And then where are we in the U.S. with, maybe coming up with our own GDPR that might render all this pointless anyway?
Yeah. So Google has not commented one way or another on the GDPR. There's a lot of speculation that like, oh yeah, they didn't run this trial in the EU because of that. Google has sort of denied that, but I think that's probably true. I think their lawyers are probably still figuring it out. So one thing about the trial is FLoC is premised on third-party cookies not existing. And during the trial, third-party cookies still exist. So anyone who gets your FLoC is going to also have access to cookies, and it's only going to enhance their ability to track you. So I think in that sense, yeah, it's if Google did start sharing FLoC IDs alongside cookies in the EU, that would be a new unprompted sharing of personal information that would, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems like that very least goes against the spirit of the GDPR, if not the letter of the law. Yeah, the thing is, like, if FLoC gets deployed in the way that it's proposed to be deployed, I'm less certain that it would be illegal under stuff like GDPR because, I think FLoC in large part is a response to GDPR and similar laws because that's why cookies are going away. Like, that's why I think that's the biggest reason Google is killing off cookies because, they're already kind of going away because we've seen, more and more kind of aggressive court decisions around GDPR that are saying like, no, you can't use this dark pattern to get people to quote unquote opt in. No, you can't use browser fingerprinting to like track people without cookies. Like all these things should be illegal under GDPR the way that it's written. And so I think advertisers are kind of in general trying to hedge against GDPR and come up with ways to keep doing more of the same within the bounds of that law. And I think FLoC is part of that effort. So yeah, I'm not sure that GDPR or something like it in the US would stop this in its tracks, because I think Google is designing these technologies so that if they have to convince a court that it's not, this stuff isn't personally identifiable, or like it doesn't constitute tracking, then they'll have a pretty good argument.
Well, this goes right back to the thing you talked about before. This is not the first time we've seen the show before. It's exactly like the pop-up browsing and the DAA thing you talked about before, where these things start to come to a head. The big companies with lots of lobbyists and deep pockets who depend upon the ecosystem see the writing on the wall and see that the legislation is coming, and so they get ahead of it, and they basically write the law in one way or another. Or they come up with the system that fixes the problem the way they want it fixed, and not the way that the government would have done it, which would have royally screwed them.
Right. Yep. No, I think you're exactly right. That's a great way to look at this, is like, yeah, because we don't have a law in the US right now. And if Google can convince lawmakers that FLoC is the solution long enough to get a law written that writes around FLoC, then, that's right. That's a huge win for them. Like, all they have to do is be like, oh no, this is great. Laws passed. Okay. Specifically exempts FLoC and its ilk.
Right.
And then 5 years later, everyone's upset again because they realize what's actually going on. Anyway.
Right. Well, and here's the other thing that often happens here too, and I'm not sure where to come down on this either, but what often happens as well when things like this happen is, okay, well, if you outlaw the thing that's everyone knows about, that's kind of transparent, and this argument's often made with things like encryption and signal and whatever, but you're driving all the bad guys to do stuff that we can't track. Now they're going to come up with something even worse that we can't stop and can't track. And actually there have been some other proposals, unified ID or something, some other weird things that have been, and other types of fingerprinting. What do you think about that? How likely is that, if Google's going to finally kill off the third-party cookie, and they'll propose FLoC, but it's not good enough for other people, so they're going to come up with something even worse?
Yeah. I think mostly that's a load of crap, because there's stuff that Google can control and there's stuff that Google can't control. And things it can control, or at least try to, are, fingerprinting, right? And it's already come out with a big plan to stop fingerprinting. But that's something Google has said for years. Before they decided they were going to block cookies, they had a series of blog posts on the Chrome blog that were like, here's why we don't block cookies. And reason number one was like, oh, well, cookies are a user-friendly technology that, gives users control. But if we take it away, then everyone will just start fingerprinting you.
Right.
It's like, you can control that. Like, Safari has gone way out. Like, they've put tons and tons of resources into stopping fingerprinting. And as a result, it's much harder to fingerprint Safari users. I mean, sometimes you can, but it's not an insurmountable task, especially with the resources that Google has.
Right.
And furthermore, fingerprinting is going to be exhibit A in things that will soon be illegal in the United States, at least hopefully. Like, fingerprinting is the most obviously anti-user, right, anti-consent. Like, there's no pretense there. Like, it is only a toxic adversarial technology. And so I think fingerprinting is going to be the easiest thing to regulate out of existence. There'll be some like malware-ish sites that do that kind of thing, but you're never going to stop everyone. You just, like, our goal is to stop the 95% of tracking that drives this $1 billion above the fold industry. You're never going to be able to stop tracking altogether, but we want to relegate it to the realm of, malware and antivirus stuff. And so, yeah, that's the one argument. The thing that is more concerning to me is the UID2 stuff, like you said. But from Google's perspective, the reason that it scares Google is because they can't control it. Like, so a little bit of context for the listeners. UID2 stands for Unified Identifier 2.0. It's this proposal by an ad tech company called The Trade Desk. It's also, proposed as like a universal standard that anyone can adopt. Basically what it is just like a framework for publishers sharing email addresses with advertisers. So like, this is another reading the writing on the wall kind of a thing where advertisers are like, all right, yeah, we're going to lose cookies one way or another, but we want to keep building profiles of people. Well, there's been a lot of momentum in the past few years towards like sites requiring you to log in to access their content. And so ad tech is just going like, people's email addresses don't change very often.
Right.
Let's just have all the publishers share their emails with us, and we'll make that a prerequisite of us serving the most valuable ads on their sites. And yeah, I really hate UID. I think UID2 is evil. I think that is, this is an anti-user technology because they want to reframe the value proposition on the web so that, you can only access content if you willingly give up your email address or your phone number or something else that's going to allow advertisers to like persistently track you, not only across the web, but across all your devices and into the physical world as well. So that's bad.
Right.
I don't want that to succeed, but I think that is the kind of thing that's going to be easier to regulate, especially if you have someone like Google lobbying on your side. And Google has said they don't like this. They don't want this to exist, which is great. But also, like I said, Google can't control that. Like the browser is not going to be able to say like, no, you can't enter your email address onto the site.
Right.
And so all Google can do is, not create new identifiers in the browser, try and stop fingerprinting, both of which they should do.
Yeah.
But UID2 is going to exist whether they like it or not. And so Google is proposing these two things, like they're pitching FLoC as like an alternative. They're like, oh, you don't want this like scary new ad tech proposal, so use FLoC instead. But these things are just going to complement each other. Like if you're a site that, wants to serve the most valuable ads and UID2 is a thing, you're going to sign up for UID2. If you can convince your users to sign in, then you're going to share their email addresses with ad tech. Right. And then if you have access to their FLoC IDs as well, that's just another data point that can go into the ad tech profiles. And it's like there's no reason for advertisers or publishers to choose one or the other when they can have both.
All right. So as we wrap up, let me put you on the spot. So
Sure.
It's really easy. Sometimes people might argue that it's easy to sit back and say, no, that's bad. No, that's bad. Do something else. I don't like that. So what is the answer then? Is there a way maybe that EFF could see that you could maybe tweak FLoC to make it acceptable to the EFF and what they think it stands for? Or is basically EFF's position, all tracking is bad, get rid of all of it, just don't do it anymore like we did back before we had it, and that's what we want? What is the solution, I guess, from the EFF? What would work? Is there a compromise here? Is there a way that you could make this work that EFF could stomach and get behind?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be reductionist, but like, yeah, I think tracking is bad. I am not convinced that the web needs behavioral ads or that any part of the free internet needs behavioral ads. Ads, sure, I'm fine with ads. Ads have existed forever.
Right.
Free newspapers started existing because of ads. I just think that I would love to see a world where you can't target ads based on who someone is. You can only target ads based on what they're looking at a specific time. I think you could do some really cool targeting technology around that is way less creepy and has way less of the issues that are associated with behavioral ads. So, I don't know if we're ever going to get there, but that is the world that I would like to see through some combination of regulation and, technical development and deprecation of these old tracking tech standards. Yeah, that's what I want. And I think that will mean less money flowing into the internet as a whole. But I think the vast majority of that, the money that's lost is going to come from ad tech. And I don't think that industry needs to exist. Right. I don't think it's imperative for our economy that, all these dozens of companies spend all day profiling you and trying to figure out how to get you to click on crappy ads. So.
Right. Well, and I think that what I hope anyway, and that's why I think it's going to require regulation for this to work, because it's got to be a level playing field. And if you tell everybody that they've got to play by these rules, then all of a sudden everyone's on the same footing, and they can all say, okay, well, I would have liked to have done this, but not only can't I do it, but no one else can either. So let's come up with a solution that works, and we'll go back to something else. And I think you're right. I think the part that will be excised from the market when that happens is the particular part that had to do with distilling, making inferences based on who I am and what I want from all this data, as opposed to just saying, well, he searched on Nike, so let me show him Adidas, in this one instance. So yeah. All right. Last question. Where do we go from here? Where do you actually see things happening from here? Do you think we're going to get federal regulation? Do you think FLoC's going to make it? Do you think someone else is going to take its place? What's your crystal ball say for the next few years in this area?
Oh man, this is gonna be dead wrong on all counts, but
And I'll
I
hold
guess
you
I'll
to it.
try.
And I'll hold you to it. I'll bring it back 3 years from now, and I'll say, "See, he was wrong." No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I'm optimistic on being able to shut down FLoC because there's been so much kind of backlash across the ecosystem with like you see all these different browsers coming out saying we're not going to support it, we're not going to support it. Like I think that's our best shot against stopping some of Google's bad new ideas is just getting their competitors and getting publishers and getting users upset about it because Google is sensitive to that kind of a thing. Federal regulation, oh gosh, I was really optimistic 2 years ago. I'm less optimistic now. I still think it's possible, but it's so hard to get stuff done, and there's so much lobbying money from the industries that stand to lose. No, I actually am optimistic. I think long term, like there have been some setbacks recently, but like more and more lawmakers are kind of realizing that this is a popular issue, and it's an extremely popular issue. Like every survey across all demographics and political boundaries shows that people hate being spied on by companies. And so I think maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but I think eventually, that energy has to find a release somewhere. And I think someone is going to pick the right moment to introduce the right bill and we can get something done. But for now, the more exciting stuff is happening in the states for sure.
Yeah.
So, and if we get a good enough kind of patchwork of state laws across the country, that is going to pressure companies to it's going to be too hard for them to design a different service for every one of 50 states. So they're going to end up trending towards whatever the most privacy protective standard is and just designing around that. We're already seeing that with California where tons of companies only have to comply with the CCPA, the new privacy law in California, for people in California, but they end up complying with it for everyone because it's like just too much effort to figure out like, oh, where does this person live?
Right.
So.
All right, so I lied. One more question. If people want to get involved in this, if they want to try to drive this discussion, if they want to bring about the end that they prefer here, what do you think is the most effective way on this issue for them to get involved? Is it elect the right people? Is it go to the your local town halls and fight local? What do you think is the most effective way for people to drive the change that they want to see in this area?
Oh man, that's a good question. I'm not qualified to answer. Yeah, I don't know. I think local politicians are a good place to start, and especially like state level politicians. Like just, you don't have to be like out protesting every day, but just, send emails, make calls like that, make it clear that these issues matter to you. And and where you can make choices, make consumer choices that indicate those preferences. Like, use a tracker blocker or use a different browser that's not from one of the big ad companies. And like try and support companies that do choose to do the ethical thing. Yeah. And in big numbers, it makes a difference. It's not, I hate when privacy is framed as a personal responsibility thing. I think I've said this last time too, where it's like, oh, if you didn't want to be tracked, you just had to use Tor all the time. Like, no, it's super inconvenient. Like you're never going to be able to learn about all this crap and be able to stop all of it. And you shouldn't. It's too much time and effort. Right. But when there is an easy choice in front of you, I guess you can try and make the choice that's going to support the companies that treat you with respect.
Well, Bennett, this was a wonderful conversation, and that's exactly what I wanted to get into. Thank you so much for coming on the show and elucidating this particular issue for us.
Thank you so much, Carrie. This is likewise on all counts. Love talking to you. Thanks.
I want to thank Bennett for coming back on the show and talking to us about FLoC. I've been wanting to talk about it for some time now, and so really, really glad to finally get him on the show and take a deep dive on what it's all about and what you can do about it and what they're trying to do. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I'll give them some credit for trying to find some sort of a happy medium, but again, it all presupposes that people want this. And I was just reading an article about this and it made a really good point. And it's, if you ask people, would you like more relevant ads? And, most people will say, well, sure. Yeah. I mean, if the two choices are show me irrelevant ads or show me relevant ads, well, yeah, if I got to watch ads, then I want relevant ads. But if you ask them, would you be willing to give up all this information and have, X, Y, and Z tracked about you over time and shared with others in order to get relevant ads? The answer is no. It's just not worth it. And there's other ways to have relevant ads. You don't have to track people in order to show relevant ads. DuckDuckGo, their whole business model is based on this. And frankly, everyone's business model was based on this before we had web tracking. You find demographic trends and, magazines, TV shows, movie placement, websites, of course. There are certain types of people that you assume are going to be attracted to certain types of content. And based on that information, you show ads there, and it's contextual. So if I'm on a NFL football site, then that probably says something about my demographics. If I'm on a Pinterest site that is for home redecorating, that may say something about my demographics. And so, if I'm looking at a list of cool things to decorate my house with, well then, yeah, show me some ads about some cool things that I might want to decorate my house with. But when I go from that site to an NFL football site, and I'm still seeing ads for things I might want to decorate my house with, that's where things just get creepy and weird. And it's just, frankly, not necessary. So, the other thing I really want to bring up, and this is crucial, is that we need to support products and services that respect your privacy. And not just because it's good for you right now, it's good for all of us collectively. And it demonstrates that there is a market for privacy, that people are willing to go out of their way to not be tracked, to favor products and services that guarantee their privacy, and perhaps, even though you shouldn't have to, perhaps even spend money to make that happen. So not only should you avoid products that are really bad about privacy, you should seek out products and services that are privacy friendly. You should go to the extra effort to make the settings in your browsers and your apps and your operating systems to protect your privacy. Don't accept the defaults. Seek out and make the changes that will protect your privacy. In Facebook, in Twitter, in Google, at all these places, all these things are signals, and all these things will show that you care about privacy. And the big one, honestly, right now, I'd say one of the biggest things that we could all do to help your privacy and all of our privacy is just stop using Google Chrome. Firefox is just as good a browser, if not better. Google Chrome is very popular, I get it, but there's really no reason to use it over Firefox. Firefox actually just came out with a really nice new look and feel, so it looks much more modern. They're also constantly implementing new privacy and security features, some of which we're going to talk about next week on the news show. And here's the other reason to use Firefox. We need competition. And Firefox, honestly, is not doing well. I mean, Chrome has something like 65 or 67% of the browser market. And Firefox, well, at one point it was maybe around the 10% range, is into the low single digits now. They've already had some layoffs last year. And sadly, they're actually, ironically, dependent on Google for a large portion of their revenue, because this is one of the trade-offs they've had to make to stay in business, is the default search engine on Firefox is Google. Now, you should absolutely change that as soon as you install Firefox. You should make it DuckDuckGo. But Google pays them to be their default search engine. By the way, Apple too. The default search engine on Safari, I believe, is still Google for the same reason. So the best way to support Firefox and to ensure that we have privacy-respecting competition is just to use it and help other people to make the switch as well. Now, if you want to go a step further, you can also donate to the Mozilla Foundation. You can make a one-time donation, or you can make an ongoing donation. I've actually started donating $10 a month to Mozilla because I want to support what they're doing. And I would be really, really sad if we suddenly were in a world where they no longer existed. So stop using Chrome, start using Firefox. Make sure you've got the privacy settings on Firefox set to strict. And I would also install uBlock Origin and Privacy Badger. And finally, make DuckDuckGo your default search engine. Do those few things, and you will be going a long way toward guarding your privacy. And then, again, spread the word, help other people do it too. We've really got to get people shifting over to Firefox, or at least away from Chrome. All right, a couple quick notes. I think I mentioned last week that I'm starting to do some webinars, some public speaking. And now that we're all used to doing Zoom, I can do them remotely, and I can do them anywhere on the planet. So I've actually created a speaker request form if you are interested, if you've got a group that would like to have me come talk about cybersecurity and or privacy. just go to bit.ly/firewalls-speaker. That's capital F and capital S in firewalls-speaker. And if you are interested in having me speak to your group, I would love to do it. Just submit the form and we'll take it from there. So as promised, I've got several new nights of my roundtable. And this week, I'm going to announce the next one. Trumpets, please. This week, I'm happy to announce Hal Lewis from upstate New York as the latest Knight of the Roundtable, a knight errant on Patreon. Thank you so much for your support, and welcome to the Roundtable. I've got more to announce, and some of these folks are going to be giving me taglines. You're going to be hearing their voices right here on the podcast introducing the show. So yet another fun reason to become a patron. Check that out at patreon.com. Okay, the challenge coin, the D20 challenge coin that I came out with is still available to new patrons. If you go to patreon.com, look for Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. Of course, this is a link in the show notes as well. And if you want the full details, I've got a blog article on it that's probably you could go read. I'm not going to go through all of it now, but it's super cool. There's only 100 of these on the entire planet. They're very collectible, and they will help you be more secure to boot. It's a real win-win-win. Now, regardless of whether or not you get the coin, you can actually generate passphrases. I created a whole website for this. It's kind of fun, called d20key.com, the letter D20key.com. I've got some virtual dice there that you can roll to create some really cool, secure passphrases. But, hey, it's a lot more fun if you have the coin, right? So anyway, check that out. Share that up with your friends. I would very, very much appreciate that. Now, the big book sale. This is crazy. So a couple things, kind of perfect storm came together to make this happen, and it's a benefit to you. Let me start with the fact that my book, for some reason, I think it originally was priced by Apress, and by the way, I don't have a say in this. This is something that Apress does, my publisher. I think they had priced the paperback, the physical copy of the book at $45, and the digital version, I think, was $30 or $35 for the ebook. That's the base price, and then, of course, Amazon often has it on sale. But, for some inexplicable reason, it bumped up to $55 for the paper book. I mean, almost we're talking like textbook range now. And I, talked to my editor at Apress and say, hey, what's going on? Can we fix this? And so it took a little while, but she was finally able to get that adjusted. And not only is it lower, but it's lower than it was before. So the paperback is now $35, and I think the ebook is $25. And of course, Amazon will probably have sales off of that. But here's the kicker. Also, right now, until June 23rd, Apress is having a summer sale offering 55% off everything, including my book. So right now, until January 23rd, with the coupon SUMMER2021, if you use that coupon code, you can get the paperback for $15.75 or the ebook for $11.25. I mean, that is, I'm sure, the cheapest it has ever been. So, hey, they make great gifts. Christmas isn't that far away. Or, any occasion, we all need cybersecurity and privacy. So now, anyway, if you were ever considering buying the book, or if you've got an older version of the book and you wanted to upgrade to the 4th edition, the latest version, now is the time to do it. Again, just go to apress.com. I'll put a link in the show notes, but if you just go to apress.com, like the letter A, apress.com, and search on Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons, you'll find my book there, and make sure you use the code SUMMER2021. Now, of course, all the rest of their books are on sale too, so that's, if there's other books you want to buy, then by all means do that as well. And again, literally, I'm pretty sure that this edition of the book has never been cheaper, probably even on Amazon, which sometimes runs, crazy percentages. This is a great, great deal. All right, that is going to do it. We got, again, another big news show for you next week. Lots of great interviews coming up in the pipeline, some really interesting cybersecurity stuff, unlike any other interviews I've had in the past. So if you have not already, definitely subscribe to the podcast. Also, would love to get some more reviews on the podcast or the book, either one. Amazon and iTunes are the best place to leave those reviews. That's where most people see them, but obviously I will take them wherever you care to leave them. However, if I do see some on iTunes or Amazon, which I do monitor, I will definitely be reading those on the air. The challenge coin is going to be around for another few weeks. Get them while they're hot. Get them while you can. Go to patreon.com. There's links, of course, in the show notes. If you ever wanted to get the book now, it's the best chance to do it. Go to apress.com and use code SUMMER2021, And still looking for support patrons on Patreon, and I'm having a great time interacting with everybody on Discord. It's a lot of fun being able to interact directly with my fans. So love to see you there, and go out and have a great summer. As long as you're all vaxxed up, you can go out and even take those masks off and get back to a normal life. I'm loving it. I'm having a great time going out and socializing again. I got trips planned and stuff to do with people. It's fantastic. So if for some reason you haven't gotten that shot yet, go get your shots. Help and encourage other people to get their shots as well. And let's put this whole pandemic behind us. I hope you're having a great summer, everybody. Take care, stay safe, and until next week, as always, everybody,